Thank you so much, Lucy, and thank you to Randy. And I also want to recognize the traditional territories on which we meet today with this global group. Thank you to Don and to Peter and all of the people who made this gathering possible. I really feel that when you bring together reckless people like you all are, people who are fearless, people who live outside the box and come in for shelter now and again, that wonderful things happen. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about the power of empathy and why I'm interested in empathy. So the quick story is that in my earlier life, I was a school teacher, a kindergarten teacher, and realized that the level of preparedness for children when they start at school was very unequal and unjust. So I set up parenting programs and early literacy programs to support parenting capacity. And in that work, I came across many, many families who did the very best they could with the deal they were given, but violence permeated the home. And I worked with little babies who were incubated in violence. I worked with babies who were shaken to death and little children who were abused and confused, and their trajectory was so diminished because of the irreparable damage to the developing human brain from violence, either witnessing or physically experiencing it. It's the environment of violence that is so destructive to developing human brains. So my aha moment was when I realized that in all of that suffering, whether it be domestic violence or child abuse and neglect, the common denominator in all of that was the absence of empathy. So I decided if I really wanted to do anything about reducing levels of violence in the world and giving children a chance for a happy, productive life, and giving our universe a chance to move ahead with an appreciation of one another, with an understanding of one another, that empathy is simply the ability to understand how another person feels, basically to feel with them, to breathe with the one lung, if you like. That capacity is not only essential to have in the home if you want to eliminate violence and aggression, but it is also essential to have it in all of our institutions, to have it in all of our businesses, to have it in every walk of life. Because if we ever want to solve not just the children's issues, but if we want to solve the major issues of our time, and I would put violence up there as number one, the issue of the climate, our challenge with climate change. We're not going to change anything unless we give a damn about the other who doesn't look like us, sound like us, eat like we eat, listen to music like we listen to. Their culture is entirely different. So on what basis can we connect with that person and that country on the other side of the mountain or across the ocean? So the notion of empathy to me was all about figuring out that we all share the same emotions. And that is the connective tissue of humankind. And that is the affective side of empathy. The idea that our emotions are our first language, and they're a universal language. They're sort of our Esperanto. And then the cognitive aspect of empathy is perspective taking. Well, that is a cognitive skill that can be trained. So I decided that empathy is something that every baby comes hardwired for. But it either flowers or fades in the attachment relationship with the key adults in the baby's life. And that's not to blame or shame those adults. They do the best they can, but unfortunately, it kind of is an intergenerational thing, just like violence is, that if you weren't raised with empathy, with somebody who really understood your needs and could meet them, and that is a very difficult thing to translate into your own parenting if you didn't receive it. So I wanted to break that cycle of intergenerational violence and poor parenting. So I brought that attachment relationship into the classroom, If you want to change anything systematically and systemically, you must go through the universality of education if you want to work with children. They all go to school in developed countries. It's where you can catch them all. So kind of like the inoculations we give children for polio, we make sure that we give them in a place where they all get them, and we make sure we check their cards to make sure that before they start kindergarten, they're up to scratch with all of their inoculations. Well, what about an inoculation for a happy, productive, caring life where you kneecap violence? So I set up Roots of Empathy, and the idea is that we would work with students in their classroom and help them develop perspective-taking skills and help them develop emotional literacy so that they could develop what is essential for empathy for others. You must first have empathy for self. So you must understand yourself. There's a need to understand how you feel, to put a name on it. So many of our youth are violent because anger is a secondary emotion. Number one, usually their feelings are hurt because they've been excluded or mocked, and we all ache to belong. It's a human requirement to have a sense of purpose and belonging, to be able to contribute to society. So to turn all that around, if we knew that we could develop empathy in our children, we knew that we could reduce aggression, increase caring for those we couldn't see, because we could find the humanity in the little baby who visited the classroom. The children sat around a green blanket and were coached to observe what they thought the baby's intentions were and what they thought the baby's feelings were. And the whole program, Roots of Empathy, is predicated on children asking questions, because there's a glaring absence of authentic question and authentic dialogue in our classrooms. We have rule-based learning, and compliance is valued more than creativity and imagination and curiosity. The way that we worked with the children was to train somebody from the community, a social worker maybe, to come in and be the instructor, and the teacher sits around the blanket with the children. And the little trick here is that teachers hold such huge sway. They are so important to children's learning, not just because of their qualifications, but because children learn primarily through relationships. And the younger they are, the more important that is. It's the lens of love when they're babies and preschoolers. And teachers are really significantly important in children's learning. And there's tons of research to show that kind, empathic, caring teachers have the highest academic achievement of students. If we invest in anything in education, it's the teacher. The curriculum is Jim Dandy, but who delivers it is what counts. So my hope was that the teachers would have the rare opportunity to see into the lives of the children, to see their emotional vulnerability and their strength, to see how honest, the level of integrity children have when they connect to the humanity of a baby. And then the Roots of Empathy instructor pitches it back and says, well, when was a time you felt a little bit anxious or a little bit nervous like baby Liam? And the children courageously share and tell one another. And in the telling, the other children hear, wow, I'm not the only one who's wimpy. Or, I'm not the only one who wets the bed. Can you imagine the courage of a child to say one of the things they're most embarrassed and worried about is that on the science trip that's coming up, they might wet the bed? So the other children in the classroom, rather than mocking that child, they say, don't worry, buddy. You can camp next to me and we'll figure it out together. So instead of children competing and pitting themselves against one another, children help one another. You switch up the tone of the classroom. The climate of the classroom becomes caring and supportive, so that the children who are the dandelions who can land and learn anywhere, they're just fine. But the orchids, and we've got a lot of children who are orchids, they need a soft cushion to land on to really take advantage of the wonderful teaching that happens in schools. So I want to show you how we help children to develop their sense of critical thinking, flexible thinking,
Their ability to have focused attention. These are some of the executive functioning skills that are not taught intentionally in school, but we develop them particularly. How to delay gratification. So it all happens through their own questions. In our training, we've got a 4-day training, we've got a 638-page curriculum, we've got lesson plans for every time you set foot in the classroom, because you better be on the money. If you're using instructional time, you better be able to prove that it's having an impact. So we've got a dozen years of research. We've got studies that prove that aggression reduces 74% in children. We've got all kinds of evidence to show that children's social and emotional competence increases. And social and emotional learning is the missing factor in education. If you want to educate the whole child, you better be sure that you educate the feeling child, not just the thinking child. Because little children, you cannot tease apart the sections of their brain that deal with cognition and emotion. They are inextricably linked. And to think that you can teach a child who's feeling worried or sad or frightened, the cortisol level is high and there's no thinking person at home. You know, in schools we typically put forward a question in math class. If Johnny has 3 apples and Amelia takes 2, the question would be, how many apples does Johnny have left? It's the sort of question where you know the teacher knows the answer and you're a little bit anxious as a child because there's one right answer. So if you're not going to put yourself out there just in case you're wrong. But in Roots of Empathy, the question would be, how is Johnny going to feel? So children will have many different answers for how's Johnny going to feel if Amelia took 2 of his apples. He might have intended to give the one to his grandmother and then his grandmother's going to be upset. Children will have huge creativity and imagination when we give them space, when we give them permission to be in charge, to be asking the questions and leading the learning. So I want to show you, hello down there, could we put up that clip, please? I have a little 1-minute clip, and in this clip, you are going to see the Roots of Empathy instructor ask 18 questions. This is just a normal clip we took, and it's not a setup. So the idea, okay, we have no sound. That's the instructor.
What does that sound like? What's the sound?
The mother's on her left.
She's telling, I want this toy. So she's saying she wants this toy, but the sound she's making. Let's put the sound together. Let's see what happens. Okay, now is this, do you think she'll be able to get this? Okay, let's watch her. Now what's she going to do? Yes. Let's see if she keeps trying. What happened? Should I pick you up? Do you need help? Okay, let's pick you up. Okay. Did she get upset when she tipped over? No. No, so is she easily frustrated? No. No, she's not. Let's try and put her back. Put her back a little bit closer again. Whoops. I think she's ready to do something else. Let's see if she tries again. It's dancing. Want to try again? What do you think? No. Do you think she wants to try? No. What do you think? He wants to try again. Do you think she wants to try again? See, look at her body's reaching. Let's try and see what happens. I want to see her do this. Does anybody remember when she was learning to roll over? What? She kept trying. Uh-oh. Did that get her? Okay. Should we try?
So little baby May is loved by every child in that class. And when we as a group, or even children as a group, come together to care about a vulnerable human being, every boat rises. The self-regulation that is so missing in our children, which leads to obviously out of control aggressive behavior, we develop by helping the children observe how the parent, through the attachment relationship, helps the baby down-regulate emotions when they're upset. So the behavior where the baby turned around and without words said to mom, am I okay? Should I be crying or can I go back to finding the toy? And the mother says, you're good to go. And that allows us in the follow-up classes, there's 27 classes over the school year, to say to the children, remember when baby May fell on her chin? She looked to her mom to see, am I all right? Who do you look to when you're worried about something? And the children learn to look to one another. The children learn to witness when another child is worried because they've learned to read the emotional cues of the baby, and we talk about it. They learn to read one another's emotional cues. So in school, we typically ask the children what they know, but in Roots of Empathy, the question is, how do you think baby May feels? And what do you think baby May is thinking? So it then comes back to metacognition. How are you learning? What are you thinking? And empathy. What is the other person thinking and feeling? So these things happen experientially. The best learning in the world is experience. The experience of Roots of Empathy, the neuroscientists tell us, is biologically embedded in the children's brains. They don't forget. It's like riding a bike. You develop empathy, you've got it, you keep it. And the research says, the longitudinal randomized research says that even after 3 years, now they're going to do a 6-year later and we'll only know that next year, but after 3 years, not only does aggression stay down and social and emotional understanding increase, but in some instances, even after 3 years, you have a further decrease in aggression. So that it is hardwired in the children. We're called a disruptive innovation in education, and it's not a bad thing. There is 100% engagement. There is not another period in the school day where children are as 100% engaged and joyful in their learning. The intrinsic motivation is how we work. You'll see that every child contributed, even the little boy who said about baby May, I think he is going to try again. That was a child who was new to the language, new to the school. Nobody laughed and said, don't you know it's a she? The instructor repeated the little boy's thing, so you think she is going to try again. Honoring his thinking, repeating it for everyone to hear, not correcting him, but not praising him. We don't praise anybody. We have far too many praise junkies in the world who are not only writing to the test, but playing to the teacher, instead of caring about their own learning and caring about one another and being interested in what other children have to say. So the authentic dialogues that happen in the classroom often bring teachers to tears because they see the armada of broken hearts that sometimes exist in their classroom and they had no idea. So I want to be mindful of my time here. I would like to say that in the world, the importance of empathy, Sarah Conrath out of the University of Michigan did a study going back to the 70s, university students in America, and they tested empathy, and this was a meta-analysis of many studies, and compared them to university students in the 90s and in this decade. And unfortunately, there's a 48% drop in empathic concern. Now, you saw empathic concern when the little boy went, oh, when the baby fell down, 48% drop in American university students and a 34% drop in perspective-taking skills. So how are we going to solve the intractable generational sectarian violence in sections of the world? We work in those sections. We're funded in Northern Ireland by the European Union to reduce inclusion and acceptance of others. But we have, in our research, a 71% increase in perspective taking. So if the children, they're not just part of the future, they are 100% of the future. And if you want sustainable social change, the investment in children is a profound act. And I think really the moral future of our universe rests on the breath of the little children. Thank you.